Welcome to ABC News' special series on Tasmania's population growth, where we examine its impact on the state through 5 different stories. Transport experts warn that Hobart risks becoming a much less livable city if it prioritises road projects over public transport. They say Hobart's at the crossroads. It's before sunrise at Blackmans Bay and Carly Bean is getting her 2 boys ready for school. She has to drive them to Hobart via the southern outlet.
We normally allow about 50 minutes when I'm doing a single school drop-off. If I'm doing a dual school drop-off, it would be over an hour.
I like traffic because it makes you late for school.
Oh.
His mum doesn't like traffic because it makes her late for work.
If we're held up or if it's a really bad day, we're often way past 9 o'clock, getting the kids to school and myself getting to work and things like that. We've missed a few tennis lessons, haven't we, buddy, because we've just been caught in really bad traffic.
A 5th lane is planned for the southern outlet, but that won't necessarily solve the problem.
But every time you build new road infrastructure, you're encouraging more people to drive. So you can end up getting trapped in a cycle of engineering where you're constantly having to try and fix one choke point after the other without ever really improving things for ordinary motorists.
Over on the Tasman highway, Gerardo Erasmo has clocked up more than 10,000 Uber trips.
Every day is getting worse and worse.
His morning commute from Howrah on the eastern shore has doubled in 2 years.
The worst traffic spot when you come from the bridge to get to the CBD.
We're on the Tasman highway at Rosny Park and traffic's been bumper to bumper for several kilometres now. Internationally recognised traffic experts say Hobart is now at the crossroads.
Hobart has a choice to make. It can either continue building more roads or it can try and look at more efficient ways of travelling around the city.
There's also the city's tourism appeal to consider.
It's fantastic buildings and the walkable areas are very attractive to tourists. I think you want to encourage that, and road access and parking is not going to be very attractive if you increase that.
State Road says traffic would dramatically reduce if just 10% of motorists carpooled. Is carpooling an option for you?
Unfortunately not for me personally, only because I require my car for work a lot.
Now naturally most people in Hobart currently drive because they have little choice. But I think as the city grows, the choices for more walk access and cycling and public transport will become clearer.
Globally, cities that the same size as Hobart have made good use of their bus network by creating corridors of high-frequency services.
Mr Erasmo thinks the city needs some type of congestion tax.
And pay a little bit more if they want to go into the heart of the CBD. Then discourage people to get into the CBD with a car.
A road user price charges people for how they use the roads. So if you're travelling in peak hour, you'd pay a bit more. If you're travelling off-peak, you'd pay a bit less.
Dr Clifton believes road user pricing could fund Hobart's road and public transport projects while also reducing congestion.
If you're driving through the southern outlet choke point in peak hour, driving a noisy, polluting old car, then you're probably going to be paying a lot of money.
He says as the number of electric cars increases, some form of tax will be needed nationwide to supplement the diminishing revenue from federal fuel excise. But would a congestion-busting tax ever be given a green light? Guy Stainer, ABC News, Hobart. The bulk of Tasmania's new residents are settling in Hobart. More than 3,000 moved to the capital last year, while the north is crying out for working age people.
Jenny King spends her days caring for patients at Tasmania's largest public hospital. But even after 6 months living in Hobart, it still doesn't feel like work.
You feel like I'm always on holiday. I go to work and I drive looking at the mountains around me across the Derwent, and you just stare at Mount Wellington as you go to work. I think sometimes people take it for granted, but really it's a pleasure to see every day.
Although Miss King easily secured a job as a nurse, it wasn't work that lured her to Hobart.
Purely lifestyle. It's just the mountains around you, the water, the cooler weather.
But 200 kilometres north in Launceston, the population story is not so positive. And there's concern it could get worse as Hobart continues to grow.
Last financial year, the population of Hobart and southeastern Tasmania increased by 1.5%. In Launceston, the growth rate was almost half that at 0.8%. In the 5 years before the last census, Launceston added an extra 2,000 residents aged 55 or older, but had lost 600 people aged between 15 and 54. Modelling predicts Launceston's working age population could shrink by more than 5,000 people over the next 12 years.
Anywhere where there's a high level of skill, anywhere where there's competition nationally for those skills, we're really struggling.
Manning Mitchell is one of the young professionals Launceston wants to attract and keep. The 26-year-old relocated from Melbourne at the start of last year to take up a job as a podiatrist. He'd never visited Launceston before, but doesn't regret the move.
It's 15-20 minutes to get anywhere around town. You'll get a park anywhere within 50 metres if you've got to go in town to do something. There's cafes, bars. It's worked out really well, to be honest. Yeah, who knows how long I'll stay.
Mr Mitchell is part of Tasmania's growing healthcare workforce. While Launceston's traditional manufacturing base has shed about 800 jobs over the past 5 years, and agriculture isn't creating enough jobs to replace them, the healthcare and social assistance sector is predicted to create more than 4,000 jobs statewide over the next 5 years.
It's actually the healthcare and social assistance industry which contributes both the greatest number of jobs to the state, and it is also our greatest contributor to the economy.
Manning Mitchell is confident the skills of healthcare workers will remain in high demand.
There's plenty of work around Tassie. With the ageing population, there's a lot of retired people that live in Tasmania, and there's a lot of work there. I know we're hiring right now.
The Northern Tasmania Development Corporation wants to attract an extra 6,000 skilled workers to Launceston over the next decade. International migrants like students and refugees have helped keep Launceston's population growth in positive territory.
The beauty of Northern Tasmania is a well-kept secret, and this is not good.
An ongoing push to see the state's population growth more evenly spread. Laura Beavis, ABC News.
Tasmania's population growth is contributing to a crisis in affordable housing. But at the other end of the market, developers are keen to capitalise on the boom. The state government's trying to make it easier for them to build more medium-density housing in Hobart. But does that mean the quarter-acre block will be gone?
Stephen Burgess makes a living creating better cities. An engineer and urban strategist, after years consulting across the globe, he's back home in Hobart.
But when I came back, someone had sort of changed all the settings and filled up one of the most beautiful cities in the world with cars, relatively speaking. And people think, oh, we've got a traffic problem, but it's not a traffic problem, it's a housing problem.
Stephen Burgess was looking for a central apartment, but he discovered it was a difficult task.
There's not enough of that inner urban housing to go around, which is forcing people who don't really want to move to the suburbs.
So why is Hobart still growing out instead of up? Traditionally, there's been a cultural lean towards larger living in Hobart. The city's appeal for many is its big country town feel. In 2016, more than 90% of dwellings were separate homes or townhouses. Flats and apartments made up just 8.6%. Greater Hobart's population grew by 3,300 people in 1 year. Add to that a housing crisis and medium-density living suddenly looks attractive.
It's only now that we're getting the increase in the property values in the residential sector where these projects are actually now starting to stack up.
But developers say Hobart has so many heritage-listed properties it's difficult to find the right site, and planning regulations slow things down. Quinton Villanueva has had his proposal for 34 residential apartments approved, but he believes there's a disconnect between the planning scheme and what members of council want for their city.
Now, I'm not pretending that, you know, every development is an instant fix, but I believe that any supply, doesn't matter where it is in the market, will restrict some of that imbalance that we're seeing at the moment in both supply and demand.
The Lord Mayor says council is receiving more applications for medium-rise apartment buildings, and they're being approved. But she says developers also need encouragement.
Many of our developers in Tasmania just want to go with what they know, which is the subdivision in the outskirts, in the Sorells and these kind of places.
Anna Reynolds believes valuable inner-city real estate that's currently zoned as commercial land may need to be freed up to house Hobart's growing population.
And if we can identify those areas and try and facilitate getting more of the medium-density housing, then we're certainly going to be helping adding to the supply of the private rental market.
One medium-density development that has been approved is here on Bathurst Street on the edge of Hobart's CBD. Due for completion next year, the Commons will have about 30 units, and they've all been snapped up for prices between about $350,000 and $800,000. The developers have had success in Melbourne with a similar model based on sustainability and community. Tasmania's capital was the logical next step.
I think timing, we're at the right time. We really saw the opportunity in there. We saw it on its uplift and population growth. And yeah, we thought let's jump into it.
So this is the Commons Di.
Di Elif has bought in. She's lived in Hobart for 40 years, and now the kids have moved out, she and partner Robert don't need a large house with a big garden and car space.
We just have different priorities, and we think it's time to downsize and hand the house on to someone who needs it for a family.
While the developers behind the Commons had an easy run with approvals, there was one hurdle they didn't expect: a lack of labour.
They were redoing the hospital, there's so much developed, so many projects down there, so it's a real supply and demand in shortage of trades and building down there, which then has an inflation on prices.
Despite the obstacles, Stephen Burgess believes more medium-density living will create a better Hobart.
It's the perfect way to get economic growth, to get population growth, to get jobs growth without getting traffic growth, which is what we all want.
An evolving capital city as it continues to grow. Ellen Coulter, ABC News.
Contributing to Tasmania's population growth has been a huge increase in overseas migration, in part because the entire state is classified as regional, which makes it easier for people to get a skilled migrant visa. But many migrants simply use the island as a temporary destination before heading to the mainland.
Most days, this is how Apple Wong earns her income, driving people around Hobart.
You can get by driving Uber. You earn $15 an hour. You can get some food on your table, not a problem. Pay the rent, but you don't have anything left, to be honest.
Apple is a trained accountant. She moved to Australia from China, studied in Melbourne, and then moved to Tasmania in August after spending thousands of dollars on a high-skilled regional visa. But she's found it impossible to find a professional job. so she relies upon Uber to make ends meet.
I've done my best to contribute to this city. I drive 12 hours some days, work for 60 hours a week, and I face all sorts of, unfair treatment.
This is one of the last days Apple will drive in Hobart. She's found a new job in Adelaide.
To me it seems astounding that a qualified accountant has had to move to another state to find work. To me that's a failing of internal processes within Tasmania.
Michael Bailey is the Chief Executive of the Tasmanian Chamber of Commerce and Industry. He says the state needs more high-skilled migrants, but admits it's difficult getting the right skills.
Certainly in Tasmania we need to be clearer on the sorts of roles that are needed, but I think equally we need to work harder as communities to break down the barriers that are clearly in front of people with skills, whether they be from migrant or from local backgrounds.
The state and federal governments are encouraging migrants to move to Tasmania, and it's working. 2,475 overseas migrants moved to the state in the year to June 2018, which is more than moved from interstate. But it's hard for locals to get work, with the Tasmanian unemployment rate at 6.7%. That's 1.5% higher than the national figure, and it's even harder for new migrants.
Tasmania really works on networks. It's at times a very difficult market to break into unless you know the right people.
Alison O'Neill is the Chief Executive of the Migrant Resource Centre, located in Glenorchy in Hobart's northern suburbs. She says with an old population, Tasmania requires more migrants.
Ultimately, we are a state that is ageing. Having people come here through different migration streams enables us to have the sort of longer term economic benefit.
I think there is this misconception that population growth automatically equates to economic growth, and that's not the case in Tasmania. We need to do much more to grow employment opportunities that are high skilled.
Lisa Denny is a demographer from the University of Tasmania. She says many former tertiary students move to Tasmania with a regional visa in order to gain permanent residency.
So they spend their time here in Tasmania, that they get their points for their visa, and then it's often that they need to move because they can't stay in Tasmania because they can't find employment.
Like the Northern Territory and South Australia, all of Tasmania, including Hobart, are treated as regional for the purposes of the skilled migration program. By comparison, in the rest of Australia, migrants are forced outside the major cities in order to meet that requirement. With housing stress in Hobart, the city could be hived out of the regional system to take some pressure off, but that presents its own problems.
You can't push migrants with skills and qualifications to an area where there are not employment opportunities for them, particularly if you're not going to support them on the ground. You can't push a migrant to somewhere where they're not going to be able to economically support themselves.
Apple Wong's life in Tasmania is over, but she says she's taking fond memories with her.
It's really a pretty state, and perhaps it's the most beautiful city I've ever lived, but it has its limitation.
But there are many more skilled migrants on their way who will be hoping their experience is less limited. Carrington Clark, ABC News.
As the population increases, some places are very happy to be far from the growing pains of the main Tasmanian cities. St Mary's, near the state's east coast, has transitioned from a predominantly mining and forestry town into a tree-changing tourist destination, and people seem to be enjoying living the quiet life.
Far from the rat race of Melbourne, the Mathers family is starting a new life. They've bought 12 acres in Tasmania's northeastern rural town St Mary's and have just started building their dream home.
Well, we came from a big city. We came from Melbourne, and we love Melbourne. It's great, but it's out of control with population and traffic and stuff, and we wanted to step right back from that.
The Mathers are one of many families trading the big city life for a quiet escape. Ian Summers has made the move to St Mary's twice, once in the 70s to take up a teaching post, and more recently he decided to relocate for good. He's now become instrumental in the town, fixing things up and operating a heritage museum in the town's old railway station.
I don't have an entry fee and I don't sell anything, so I don't think I'm on the road to a fortune. But I do cause money to be spent elsewhere. It's a contribution to the town, if you like.
St Mary's is a town that built itself on mining and forestry. In the 70s, around 300 people worked at the nearby Cornwall coal mine and Fingal mine. Another 300 locals also worked in forestry, but that was before the industry collapsed.
The coal mine's reduced now to one mine and about 50 or probably 60 people.
John and Ruth McGivern have lived in St Mary's their whole lives. They were next door neighbours, fell in love, married and stayed on. They believe the town is now experiencing a new shift.
And all of a sudden the demographic changed. People started to move in because they could buy large blocks of land around the area. Tree change probably, if you like to call it that. And it started to build up again.
It's clean, it's airy, and it's 10 minutes from the coast and an hour and a half to Launceston, so we don't miss out on anything.
The town has now brightened up. We've got 6 places you can have a coffee, where a few years ago you couldn't get one.
Evelyn McGee works 7 days a week at the town's bakery, which is frequently visited by tourists heading to the east coast. She moved from the Philippines in the 90s and loves the people.
You can go anywhere, people say hi, and it's just like a big family.
According to the latest census data, 682 people currently call St Mary's home. That's around 150 more people than in 2006. And those who live here believe the population will keep increasing due to the laid-back lifestyle. The Mathers are able to continue their professional jobs remotely from their new St Mary's home. But as for whether others should make the country life switch,
we don't want too many people coming to St Mary's.
Yeah, don't like it too much because we're quite happy with our little piece of paradise.
I don't think anyone who comes here would be disappointed, but we don't want it to become Launceston.
No, not at all.
a country lifestyle that's becoming more common for many Australians. Monica Dadson, ABC News, St Mary's.
Thanks for sticking with us through to the end. We hope you enjoyed ABC Tasmania's population series and it's given you food for thought about your future.